Pandora Syndrome. Written by April Walleen. Read by April Walleen. Directed and recorded by Andreas Gallego. Chapter 6. A Night Out. One night as we sat across from each other at Mel's, a 1950s-style diner and weirdo hotspot on Hollywood and Highland, Remy threw me a curveball. A key element of survival in your new world is being able to spot other supernaturals, Remy told me. We'd settled at a window table that looked out onto the heart of Hollywood, the iconic block where famous people place their handprints in cement. "They have strawberry banana milkshakes here," I announced happily as I perused the late-night menu. "My grandmother used to make those for us. I'm gonna get one. Oh, and maybe a hamburger, too." Remy just stared at me. "I know that being a vampire is still new to you, but you are aware that you can derive no nutrition from those items, yes? Only blood will do." I rolled my eyes. "Even if I were human, I wouldn't derive any nutrition from these items. It's all about the taste. I can still enjoy that, can't I?" Remy smiled apathetically. "You are welcome to try if you wish." "Excellent," I replied and flagged down the waitress to place my order. Once she was gone, I turned back to Remy. "Besides, we look strange just sitting here with nothing in front of us." "We have water," Remy replied, glancing at the 2 glasses of clear liquid before us. "You know, that's a quick way to piss off your waitress." "Unless you leave $10 on the table before you depart," he retorted. "Then they have profited without needing to serve you." I stared at him a moment. "Okay, good point," I conceded. "It still looks weird, though." Remy just shrugged his shoulders. "Look out the window and tell me what you see," he told me then, and I followed Remy's gaze to the Hollywood and Highland crosswalk. I scanned the crowd, easily picking up clothing details and mannerisms with my new superhuman eyesight. "I see a bunch of drunk delinquents wandering in and out of clubs and bars." Remy smirked a little. "Watch the man in the leather jacket," he instructed. I looked back at the crosswalk and noticed a tall man in a black leather jacket. He was thin but broad-shouldered, with long brown hair and many large visible tattoos. "Got him," I replied. "Watch him carefully. His eyes, his movements. Look at the tattoos on his neck." He was smoking a cigarette as he leisurely paced back and forth. I could see others acting similarly, except this man wasn't part of a group. He hovered around the fringes, appearing as though he may be with a particular person, but never actually interacting. I watched him carefully as his eyes darted around the boulevard. It was then I noticed that they were continuously revisiting a particular group across the street. It was a group of tall males and females with tan skin, broad shoulders, shaggy-looking black hair, and short leather jackets. There was definitely a theme amongst the late-night fashions of Hollywood. "Any guess as to who or what that man might be?" Remy asked. "Someone plotting revenge against a group of bikers?" I replied as the waitress brought my burger and shake. "That is a hunter," he told me. I instantly pictured a Van Helsing-like man with a broad-brimmed hat and long duster. Nothing like the dude I was currently looking at. Remy had mentioned hunters to me before. They were like supernatural undercover cops. No long robes, no big crosses, no uniforms necessary. Just a tendency towards black and gray clothing. It chilled me to know that hunters might be anybody. "The surest way to spot a hunter is the brand of their order," Remy told me. "A tattoo of 3 jagged lines on the hunter's neck or arm. When patrolling, they must wear it in the open as a warning to others." I examined the man again. Black tattoos crawled up his neck, seeming to culminate around one particular mark. My eyes widened as I recognized the 3 crooked lines Remy had described. It looked more like a scar than a tattoo. The flesh there was puckered and pinched. "There are several hunters assigned to every city," he explained. "Even more in Hollywood since it is such a heavily trafficked area." "Trafficked by humans or supernaturals?" I asked curiously. "Both," he replied. "The more prey, the more predators. Hunters make sure the predators do not get carried away." "So, it's not good to feed in areas like this?" "Actually, back alleys are fairly ideal," he replied, and I raised an eyebrow. "Hunters do not impede us unless laws are broken, as long as no one dies and we are not exposed to supernatural beings. They keep the peace." I shook my head, trying to process the information as I took a bite of my burger. I chewed and chewed, and chewed some more, expecting my burger to eventually go down. Instead, just as the pizza had in Jack's apartment, it turned to a thick paste in my mouth. The definition of insanity is doing a thing over and over while expecting a different result. Problem? Remy asked with a knowing smirk. I glared at him and tried to talk through my mouth full of burger paste. It's thick. Remy smiled slightly. Solids are always a problem for us. Remember that. With a glare, I forced myself to swallow my burger goo. I then sipped at my milkshake to wash it down. The taste was good. Not quite like it used to be, though. It was less flavorful, and definitely didn't provide the satisfying nourishment that blood did, but it gave me the nostalgic memory of my grandmother's milkshakes. That was good enough for me. Remy's lips quirked a little at the corner. You are a very strange vampire, Pandora Todd. I was a strange human, too, I replied, continuing to watch the hunter as I drank my shake. So, the hunter isn't here for us, right? I asked, trying not to acknowledge my slight pang of fear at that thought. They are here for other creatures tonight, he replied, taking a perfunctory sip of his water. Likely the werewolves. I nearly spit out my shake. No shit! Real werewolves? I squealed. Yes. You likely already know quite a bit about them. Many of the legends are true in their case. I looked out the window and a strange, animalistic pang of curiosity hit me. I wanted to go outside, to see if I could catch their scent. What would they smell like? I wanted to see how they moved and learn more about them. I would not, Remy said, reading my thoughts. There was an edge in his voice. Werewolves look on humans as shepherds would sheep. Therefore, vampires are a threat to them, to their charges, their pack mentality, their way of life. Wow, was all I could say in response. Remy looked me in the eye then and adopted a meaningful tone. Werewolves value life. Our very presence is repugnant to them, especially our scent. We may be faster and more agile, but they are stronger and have better senses. It is best to stay away from them. I nodded and gave the burly group a more thorough perusal. They looked fierce, territorial. The way you can just look at an animal and know it'd snap a finger off of you just to make a point. Remy let me ruminate a moment before placing some money on the table. Finish your beverage so we may continue. There's more? I asked wide-eyed. Oh yes. I quickly gulped down my shake. Walking down Hollywood Boulevard, I was hit by a barrage of scents. Foods, alcohols, and refuge seemed to assault my senses. Beneath that, however, was the unmistakably metallic smell of blood circulating in the veins of those around me. It was intense, to say the least. My fangs twitched at the roof of my mouth, a feeling I was getting strangely used to. I forced myself to stay calm-ish. At least I didn't go leaping fangs out at the first person I saw. The boulevard was lined with bars, and it was busy this time of night. I couldn't help marveling at it all with my new eyesight. The neon lights in bar windows looked oddly bright to me, like little red and blue homing beacons in the night. I stared at one curiously as Remy led me along. There were people gathered around the neon lights, looking like moths to a flame. I continued watching them. When one of them turned my way, my breath caught in my throat. The woman's eyes were white, with no distinguishing colors between the pupil, eyeball, and iris. She appeared muted compared to the people walking by. There was an oddly translucent quality about her. What the hell? Was this some strange supernatural creature I hadn't heard about yet? I stared in awe as her mouth began to move, like she was trying to talk to me. I strained my ears, attempting to hear. I almost caught some faintly whispered words when I felt Remy's hand on my shoulder. This way, Remy said, breaking me from the strange sight. I had stopped walking and hadn't realized it. Remy looked down at me with a quizzical arc to his brow. I looked back to where the woman had been, but the strange, muted figures were gone. I shook my head in confusion. Are you all right? Remy asked me then. I forced a reassuring smile. Yeah, just thought I saw something. Let's go. Remy nodded and steered me towards a narrow alleyway. Stay quiet, he insisted as we reached a small back parking lot. Immediately, I smelled the blood and heard the whimpers. Remy peeked around the corner of the building before motioning me to look. There, I saw 4 vampires feeding on a blonde woman dressed in a slinky silver dress. She cried mutely as 2 vampires fed from her neck. 2 others had her wrist. I stood horrified. It was like something out of an old horror movie, complete with blood running sloppily down their faces. I shivered in disgust. That is a coven, Remy explained quietly. One of the reasons you need to be careful around other vampires. If a coven catches you, they may try to claim you as one of their own. I leaned back in offense. I would never join them, I replied in distaste. You might not have a choice, he replied soberly. They usually gain new members by ganging up on lone vampires and draining them of blood. Then they keep them in the coven's lair, refusing to feed them until they commit to the clan. That's horrible. It's a group mentality bred from centuries of backward thinking, he explained. The hunters let them be as long as they do not kill. They are abhorrent groups that often gorge on blood until they are drunk with it, or they feed off one another so often that the lack of fresh blood causes their mind and body to deteriorate. You must stay clear of them at all costs. Duly noted, I cringed before looking back at the blonde woman. I could hear her heart beginning to slow. They were taking too much blood. They're gonna kill her, I told Remy fretfully. Remy considered that a moment and then straightened up. I tried to ask what he was doing, but Remy just strode toward the group with his easy confidence. Upon sensing his presence, the vampires turned, gathering quickly in front of their victim as if to hide her. What do you want, old one? A vampire hissed at him. There is a hunter nearby, Remy replied confidently. I believe you would like to leave that woman alive. The vampires looked to one another seriously, and then nodded to Remy. Carelessly leaving the woman slumped on the ground, they passed Remy. Upon seeing me, one of the vampires sniffed. His eyes flared as he eyed me in interest. Look at her again, and I will assure that the hunters find you, Remy called, suddenly at my side. The vampire practically leapt back, following his buddies quickly out of the back lot. I looked at the woman sadly as she groaned on the ground. She was alive, but would likely need a hospital. Do not worry. I will inform the staff of her state. She will be helped. Staff? I asked as Remy led me to a black unmarked door I hadn't noticed. He knocked once, and it opened to reveal a tall, pale man. There was a strange, earthly scent with a gingery sting coming off of him, but I had no idea what he was. Definitely not a vampire. Remy nodded to the blonde on the floor of the back lot. The tall man followed his gaze and cursed. Quickly, he nodded to another man inside, and then motioned for us to go in. We walked past him into the dark building. The smell of sweaty, drunk people nearly overwhelmed me. Where were we going? Did he really want to hang out in a bar? Slowly, we fought our way through the crowd and settled at the back edge of the bar. It was dim, but everything was as clear to me now as it had been out in the moonlight. I'm not sure I'm ready for this much interaction, I told him self-consciously as people pushed by us. This place was far more crowded than the boulevard or late-night grocery store. You will be all right, he assured me. Remy gently turned me towards the crowd and then pulled me back against him. I blushed as my back pressed to his chest. Now, Remy's cool breath breezed past my ear, sending shivers down my spine. Hold on to me so that we appear as a couple instead of two vampires sizing up a bar. I nodded, and he wrapped me in his arms. I felt strangely giddy at the contact, but forced myself to take a calming breath. We were here to learn, not to flirt. Tell me what you smell, he asked me then. I had a feeling he didn't mean the overwhelming scent that was him, so I focused on the bar. I breathed in the air, letting it fill my lungs. Unwashed masses? I replied with a grimace. There was no other way I knew to describe it. Yes, but go past that. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Smell their blood. Everyone has a different scent. Humans, supernaturals, all of us. He opened his eyes and they seemed just a bit brighter, more silver than blue now. Focus. Pick a scent that stands out to you. I took a calming breath, closed my eyes, and hesitantly scented the people around me again. I tuned out the music and the feel of my body against Remy's. Not an easy thing to do. Dialing down all of my senses, save for smell. It was like trying to pick out a voice in a loud room. I just had to focus, and my receptors seemed to tune in. The first thing that came were base scents, cleaning chemicals wafting from the bathroom, then the years of spilled whiskey ingrained in the floor and walls. I winced, but forced myself to continue on. I began to separate those smells from the organic ones of flesh and blood. Slowly, I could detect the different notes. I scented the sweet smell of bourbon, but then I realized it wasn't the liquor itself. There was a rustiness there. I blinked. It wasn't the actual smell of bourbon. It was blood with a bourbon tinge. I turned towards the smell. Remy followed my gaze to a swaying man who greedily drank from a highball glass filled with ice and amber liquid. Alcohol is easily scented on the blood, he told me then. There's a good reason for this. While we cannot get drunk on spirits themselves, if we drink from someone that is inebriated or on some kind of narcotic, the effect can transfer to us. Many vampires enjoy the high of feeding on drunks. Well, it was nice to know I could still get drunk if I wanted to. A scotch or tequila shot just wouldn't do it. Look to the other end of the bar, Remy instructed me then, and I turned. There were 2 females there linked arm in arm as they watched the stage. I scented them and caught their heady ginger root smell. I'd noticed it before, but it was particularly strong on them. What is that? I asked. When there is a spicy tinge to a person's scent, it means they are supernatural, he explained. We cannot scent it on each other since we are bonded, but all supernaturals have it. It is a sharp smell intended to get your attention. It lets you know that there is potential danger nearby. Scent them again. I did, and noticed the coppery metallic scent mingled with the ginger root smell. That is the unique odor of vampires. I nodded and examined them further. They looked thin, ghastly pale, and had deep circles beneath their eyes like they were sick or suffering from malnutrition. What's wrong with them? I asked him. Like the coven you saw outside, there is another pitfall that can ensnare vampires. The mating bond. I stiffened as I felt the pull between Remy and I. Could we end up looking like those two? That is what happens when mated vampires feed from one another solely and hardly get fresh blood. They are in the beginning stages of a mental disease that can develop. If anyone were to try to separate the two, they would go feral and instantly attack. That's terrible, I muttered, watching the vampires as they swayed to the music like one sickly being. Are we in danger of that? I asked him. No, he smirked. We hardly feed off one another. It takes years to get to that point. We get plenty of fresh blood, so no need to worry. I am simply preparing you in case you should run into such a pair. They are best avoided, as they often see outside vampires as a threat. I nodded, and then froze as a sudden sharp ginger smell pricked my senses. I turned as the hunter I'd seen on the corner walked into the club. He stared intently across the room at a group of bikers I hadn't noticed before. It was the same group he had been watching on Hollywood Boulevard. I focused on the bikers, and a moment later I smelled them. They had the same sharp supernatural scent as the hunter, but with decidedly earthier tones. It was a familiar scent that reminded me of Sarge. The definite scent of canine. My fingers curled anxiously, and I narrowed my eyes at the werewolves. It was then that the hunter passed by us. I took a deep breath, quickly sorting the cigarette smoke clinging to him from his natural musk. The man smelled of ginger, definitely supernatural, but it was sickeningly sweet, almost syrupy. My stomach churned unpleasantly at the scent. I waited for him to pass, but instead he stopped, looking Remy dead in the eye. I surveyed his webwork of neck tattoos before settling on the one Remy had pointed out, the 3 crooked lines that marked him as a hunter. Remy held me firmly against him and smiled politely at the hunter. "Rarely see you on this side of town, Romulus," the man grunted at him with a nod. "Just taking in the sights," Remy replied. I could sense the power on the man. It was like a strange pressure in the air around him, a tension that threatened violence at the smallest infraction. I didn't like it. "Keep it that way," the man replied, and then departed, giving me a brief sideways glance before heading to the group of rowdy werewolves. "I think we had better go," Remy told me then, and began guiding me towards the exit. "What? Why?" I asked. "Because that group of werewolves has done something to earn that hunter's attention. He is about to confront them, and we do not want to be around when that happens." I could feel the new tension gathering in the air. He was right, but something was telling me to stay. Some deep whisper that called to me. "I need to see this," I told him then. Remy looked down at me, concern knitting his brow. "I am not sure you are ready to see the darkest sides of this world." "I'm a big girl, Remy," I assured him, even though I wasn't entirely sure of it myself. I just had an odd feeling that I couldn't ignore. Remy considered my words. "Just be sure to stay by my side," he said, holding me to him tighter. I watched as the hunter approached the group. One by one, the bikers stiffened and turned. They huddled in, seeming to present a united front against the coming threat. "Be silent, watch, and listen," Remy instructed me quietly. I was definitely already watching, but now I perked my ears to listen in on their conversation. "Finally done lurking in the shadows, huh, Hunter?" the largest male biker asked. "What do you want?" The man looked tough, with long, thick black hair and shoulders so broad I wondered if he had to turn sideways to get through doors. He was flanked by a group of similarly fearsome-looking men and women. The hunter was clearly outmanned. I had to give him credit, though. He stood his ground. "I have no issue with you," the hunter told him plainly, and then shifted his gaze to a shorter blonde man next to him. "He, on the other hand, needs to come with me." The blonde didn't flinch, but the rest of the bikers looked at him curiously. "If you have a bone to pick with one of us," the large dark-haired man replied sternly, "you have to deal with all of us." He was clearly their leader. "Let's make this official then," the hunter replied, pulling a thin piece of paper from his pocket and began to read. "Robert Hargrove, an inquisition has been declared. You are accused of murdering several humans and breaking the veil on numerous occasions." I stared in confusion. "What's the veil?" I asked Remy. "It is what we call the deception used to blend in with the human populace." The hunter stared down at Robert then. "Under my authority as a hunter and agent of the order, I am to take you into custody where you will be held until the date of your inquisition." Robert just stood looking cocky. "You and what army?" he taunted. "I don't see anyone with you." The hunter calmly turned his gaze on the biker's tall, black-haired leader. "There are a lot of innocent people here," he said in a low, warning tone. "It would be a shame for an altercation to happen in your territory, but I leave the decision up to you." With a glare, their leader looked around, seeming to weigh his options. Was I really about to see a fight go down? It was then that I felt a strange presence coming from the blonde man. No, not from him. It was around him. There, I saw several wispy figures clinging to him tightly. They were so faint I almost thought they were a trick of the light. The werewolf's leader shifted then, drawing my attention. He did not look happy as he turned to the blonde man. "We can't afford a fight with the hunters. Not with the looming war," he explained. I looked back at Remy. "War?" I asked him. "Altercations they have with other packs," he whispered in my ear. "It is not something you will ever hear about unless you talk to a wolf." I nodded wide-eyed. Not only were there werewolves, they had whole wars no one knew about. But where would they fight? How would no one notice? I tried to wrap my mind around it, failed, and decided to give up. My brain could only handle so much new information at a time. Another panic attack I did not need. "Harvey, come on," Robert pleaded. "They'll wrap me up in silver chains. You can't let them do that. I'm your brother." "It'll be temporary, and you'll heal," Harvey reluctantly insisted. "It's only until your inquisition. Then we'll get you out. I swear it." "Unless you have something to hide," a young female biker called then, glaring at the blonde man. "You shut your mouth, Lana," Robert yelled back. "Make me," she retorted, and I could swear the hair on her arm grew longer. Looking panicked now, Robert began to shift. If not for Remy's training, I might not have noticed the movement. He was leaning as though to bolt for the door. The strange wisps around him seemed to intensify then, wrapping around Robert as if to strangle, but he didn't seem to notice. Then it happened. Robert's foot hit the ground and he took off, pushing past his pack to avoid the hunter. He dashed through the dancing bar patrons, shoving them left and right as he barreled straight towards us, angling for the back door. Remy pulled me into him, protecting me from the man charging our way. The hunter calmly pulled a coiled length of chain from the inside of his leather jacket, letting one end of it clink heavily to the ground. A moment later, it lit up with a strange golden energy. However, it was the strange wisps wrapped around Robert's torso that kept my attention. I could now see where one started and another ended. One looked angry, another looked sad, and a third looked downright murderous. It was the sad one that drew my eye. Its blank, cloudy eyes looked at me then, and I stiffened. Like the lady in front of the neon sign, its mouth began to bob open and shut. It was saying something, and as soon as I realized that, I could hear the ghostly words echo in my head. "Help me." My eyes widened. As Robert ran by me, I couldn't help but reach out to touch the wisp. As soon as my finger made contact with its cold, smoky surface, Robert froze, now seemingly held in place by the wisps wrapped around him. I withdrew my hand, watching in awe. "Pandora," Remy called in shock as Robert writhed in their smoky grasps. One huge hairy arm came down to swipe at me then. Remy moved, ready to block, when the wisps suddenly elongated and constricted. wrapping around Robert like an ethereal anaconda, pulling him back into place. "Pandora," Remy called. His eyes were wild as he looked me over for signs of harm. "Are you all right?" "They needed my help," I replied simply. Just then, the wisps began to slither up towards Robert's face, where they promptly slid into him through his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. "Hold on. Something's happening," I told them, and Robert suddenly unfroze. "I, Robert Hargrove," he said in a low monotone voice, "confess to the brutal murders of Francesca Soto, Bill Cox, and Terry Norte. I killed them for the sake of the hunt and reveled in tearing them apart with my bare claws." Everyone in the bar stared at him in surprise and disgust. Quickly, the hunter took up his chain and approached. "Robert Hargrove, you are hereby arrested on your own admission for the crime of murder. You will accept your punishment at the hands of the order and a jury of your peers." The hunter then wrapped his strangely glowing chain around Robert's wrists. As soon as the chain touched him, Robert seemed to come back to his senses. "You bitch, what'd you do to me?" Robert reeled, getting momentarily loose from the hunter's chain. In the blink of an eye, Remy was in front of me and had Robert up off the ground by his throat. "I have this, Romulus. Stand down," the hunter told him. "He tried to assault my tyro," Remy hissed. "It is my right to defend her." "Take it up at the trial, then. I'm bringing him in." Remy eyed the man, clearly not wanting to let Robert go. But eventually, he let the wriggling, suffocating man to the ground, allowing the hunter to take him away. The hunter yanked on the chain, pulling Robert forward. He stumbled, but did not fall. I suspected his werewolf agility helped with that. Then the hunter looked back at Remy. "We will have a conversation about this later," he said, eyeing me seriously, and then turned, hauling the killer werewolf toward the entrance of the bar. I didn't like the sound of that. I watched Robert as he stumbled along, searching for the wisps that had been surrounding him. They were gone, and yet somehow I knew they were at peace. How I knew, I wasn't sure. It was just a feeling I had in my bones. "Pandora?" "Pandora," Remy called, drawing my attention. "Are you sure you are all right?" I nodded silently. I felt strange, but couldn't really put my finger on what was different. Happy to be leaving the bar, I let Remy guide me towards the back of the club. I saw the group of werewolves talking heatedly amongst themselves. I doubted that they were happy about what just happened, or that one of their own got caught making sport of humans. That's when it dawned on me. A lot of weird shit had just happened, in front of a lot of humans. "What's going to happen to them?" I asked Remy, pulling back slightly to stop our progress. He looked back at me and smiled. "Do not worry about the humans. They will not be harmed. When a hunter is about to make an arrest, they place wards in the immediate area, ones that deter and wipe the memory of any human in the vicinity of supernatural occurrences. All they will remember is a fight and an arrest." I nodded and breathed a sigh of relief. It's not like I knew any of these humans, but still, I didn't want them to die because they witnessed some serial killer werewolf being arrested. Once we were outside, I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I'd been full of tension I hadn't even known I'd been holding on to. As I breathed, I felt the tension leave me. Unfortunately, my strength seemed to go with it. I faltered in my step and was instantly caught by Remy. "Pandora, you are clearly not all right," he insisted. "You might be onto something there," I replied as my knees buckled beneath me. Remy picked me up then. I was just so exhausted all of a sudden. "Can we go now?" I asked weakly. He nodded, and I struggled to stay conscious as we hurried back to his place. When we reached Remy's home, I took blood from his morbid little blood bank and relaxed. My muscles were sore and my mind reeled as though I were recovering from a spell of vertigo. Once I was feeling a bit better, he told me more about the hunters and how they worked. They were mostly magic users with a peppering of supernaturals in their ranks, including vampires, shifters, and even a few demons. They were chosen for their specific powers and trained to subdue any type of supernatural threat. If you stepped out of line with them, you could find yourself in a dank cell locked away from the world and unable to use any of your supernatural abilities for however long they deemed. The Order and their hunters held something called an inquiry before sentencing. If deemed a nuisance to other supernaturals or humans, the Order gathered a group of the offender's peers, i.e. whatever supernatural race they belonged to, and had them defend their brethren. I guess it paid to be liked amongst your peers. Remy had seen it and apparently even helped the Order apprehend lawbreakers on occasion, which might explain why that hunter had given him the heads up about the coming altercation. Regardless of that, Remy was adamant that Jack and I stay away from hunters at all costs. I hadn't received any backlash for my part in the altercation, but I wondered if I might be called upon as a witness. I definitely didn't want to explain how I'd gotten the wolf to confess with a mere touch, largely because I had no idea how I'd done it. Remy wanted me to know about the supernatural community, but definitely stressed my need to stay away from it as much as possible. Fine by me. The whole supernatural world seemed dark and dangerous. If I wanted that, I could just play Castlevania. It was a whole lot less deadly for me. So I now had to accept that all that went bump in the night, the things of story and legend, were all true in one way or another. Though Remy never hung out with any such creatures, not even other vampires. He simply pointed them out to me every time we saw one, so that I would know what to avoid when he wasn't around. As for our interaction with humans, I never understood why they couldn't know about us. I was pretty sure your average human wouldn't recognize a vampire if one came up and bit them. Remy insisted that we must maintain the protective veil in which this fragile world lies, which translated to keep your ass in check. I knew better than to go flashing my fangs in a crowd, but it was still a topic Remy and I often debated. We usually agreed to disagree. I had gotten better at appearing human in public, and I'd finally adjusted to my new nighttime schedule. Luckily, I'd never been a morning person anyway. I had my strength under control, and could now open a door without ripping it off its hinges. Unfortunately, the odd game controller still perished in the heat of gameplay. I stood looking down over the vast parking lot leading to the back of the grocery store. "I can't," I said as my hands shook. Quickly, I stuck them in my pocket so Remy wouldn't see. "You have to," Remy replied. I was against his chest as I tried to back away from the ledge. "But why?" "Do you wish to repeat the incident with your brother?" he asked without humor. I winced and glared back at Remy. He just stood looking unapologetic. He knew I hated it when he brought up what I'd done to Jack. I shifted uncomfortably on the rooftop where we surveyed my would-be prey, a nighttime stockboy loading wine crates onto a docking platform. Remy insisted that we observe first and then feed, all so that we could size up our target, see how best to feed without being caught, and how to get close without alarming our prey. This time, he was coming with me to make sure I got it right. My stockboy had been the only one venturing in and out of the store, so it was reasonably safe to say he was alone, and would be for a while. We were watching from a distance. Many creatures, even humans, could sense vampires. We were predators. It's only natural we would set off some instinctual alarm bells. If we didn't get close enough to charm them before they sensed us, odds were the meal would venture off to safer ground. "I don't see why I can't just drink from your macabre little blood bank," I pouted. Remy had been trying to teach me to hunt for months now, yet I still couldn't feed myself properly. It was the one thing I just couldn't seem to get. "Do you plan to never leave my home, then? You would like to be dependent on me for the rest of your existence?" I didn't bother to answer him. He had a point, and it stung. It all just seemed so gruesome, stalking people and sucking their blood. I never liked the idea of being a hunter, the Elmer Fudd to somebody's Bugs Bunny. Remy arched his eyebrow, picking up on my thoughts. "It's a cartoon," I clarified to him with a glare. Remy's gift for mind reading still aggravated me, but I knew he couldn't always help it. He was a vampire that read minds, and I was a vampire who talked to dead people. These were just the facts. The wind whipped over the edge of the rooftop, tangling my hair about my face unpleasantly. "How long do you propose we stay here watching that stockboy unload a truck?" he asked. I had to admit he was right. Every week for the last several months he had taken me someplace new. Parks, clubs, coffee shops, concerts. I tried feeding on men, women, younger, older. Each attempt yielded the same result. I'd panic at the last minute, leaving the target standing there confused, and then trudge back to Remy's place to feed from his stock instead. I knew it was something I had to get over. I couldn't live on freezer guy blood alone. I mean, it was good, better than blood from the butchers, but it still wasn't the same as hunting and feeding. It reminded me of cats. Sure, indoor cats lived longer, but only outdoor cats were the creatures they were meant to be. Besides, I didn't want to become some sickly-looking, malnourished knockoff Nosferatu. Wait, was that Orlok's problem? Did he hesitate to slurp down blood in the beginning too? I cringed inwardly. I mean, really, what kind of neurotic mess was I that I couldn't even feed myself? Look, this isn't easy for me, okay? I finally said, trying to rally some sympathy for my cause. We have watched him long enough, Remy announced then. Let us go. He sidestepped me and then dropped effortlessly off the side of the building. Peeking over the edge of the roof, I saw Remy on the street below. He stood unruffled by the fall and looked up at me expectantly. He motioned for me to join him. Unfortunately, that didn't mean taking the stairs. My head swam as I looked down. Okay, so maybe that was another thing I hadn't quite mastered. I still hated heights. Sadly, vampirism didn't make you immune to vertigo. When trapped in an urban setting, sometimes the only way out was down. I knew a fall wouldn't kill me. It might not even hurt if I landed correctly. Unfortunately, I was still a huge klutz, and Remy was determined to have me learn this lesson too. Feeling as though I were about to topple inelegantly off the roof, I focused and took a breath. I scooted towards the edge, preparing to take the leap. Unfortunately, as I began to drop, a spell of vertigo hit me. At the last moment, I panicked and grabbed for the ledge, which crumbled beneath the strength of my grip. With an unladylike screech, I slipped off the roof. My shoulders slammed into the side of the building as I plummeted and spun. Frightened, I barely managed to right myself before hitting the asphalt below. Somehow, I'd managed to land on my feet. Then a shockwave of nerve-shattering numbness surged through me. I winced in pain as I checked myself for damage. My legs were mostly fine, but the shoulder that had hit the side of the building was another matter. I took a deep breath in preparation for the coming pain. Then I grabbed my shoulder and popped it back into place. I nearly howled with the shock of it. My shoulder looked a little misshapen, but a few minutes later, the pain, along with my scrapes, bruises, and swelling, would fade away. Unfortunately, now my stomach growled in hunger, having used what blood I'd imbibed earlier to accelerate healing my injuries. My bloodlust peaked, making my fangs twitch. Remy just loomed over me with a smug expression. Everything all right? I glared at him spitefully. It was just like him to look handsome and collected while I was a hobbling mess. I'll be fine, I snapped stubbornly. I brushed myself off and motioned for him to lead on. As we headed across the vacant parking lot to the loading dock, I tried to push back my fear of failure. That's when my stomach grumbled audibly. The stock boy was starting to look tasty. I couldn't let my hunger get out of control, or it would be Jack all over again. I just had to pull up my big girl vampire panties and suck this poor boy's blood. In the loading dock, my meal-to-be pushed along a dolly cart stacked with yogurt boxes. He had no idea he was being stalked. Well, at least it was going well so far. Remy gave me a meaningful nod, and I hung back, staying quiet. He had said he would walk me through this, but I wasn't exactly sure how. Figured I'd just watch and learn since nothing else had worked so far. "Excuse me, sir," Remy called. The boy came out to the loading platform then. He was young, with dark hair and eyes, maybe of Indian descent. At best, he was just out of high school. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking confused. Guess he wasn't expecting company at 3 a.m. "Not me, actually. I found this girl wandering the parking lot," Remy replied, glancing back at me. Slowly, I came out from around the side of the building. "She is so upset she cannot speak. I cannot seem to get through to her and was wondering if you could help her." Catching on, I fake sniffled and hunched over meekly. This story seemed a bit dramatic for my tastes, but I'm sure Remy had a plan. Well, I'm not sure what I could do," the boy told him, climbing down the platform stairs to us. "Want me to call the police for her? I think there's a station nearby." He gave me a once-over, his eyes lingering on the curvier bits of my body. By the distracted look on his face, I knew he thought I was cute. The scent of his blood caught me then. It was a sweetly metallic musk that intoxicated my senses. My stomach churned in longing. "I am afraid I am no good at assessing injuries," Remy continued. "Could you take a look at her?" Sure." The boy smiled and came towards me like he was locked in some sort of vampire tractor beam. "Well, her shoulder doesn't look too good," he replied, pointing out some residual bruising from my earlier fall. The closer he got, the stronger the musk of his blood became. My stomach lurched again and my fangs pushed down from their home behind my canines. This was it, the moment I dreaded, the moment I would suck this poor kid dry. Taking a steady breath, I slowly approached him. Locking eyes with the boy, I could feel his lust and excitement, causing his blood to quicken. I could almost taste him. He smiled at me and leaned down for a kiss, baring his neck to me. Before I knew it, I was an inch from the boy's artery. My fangs were poised, ready for attack. I paused, distinctly remembering the sound of Jack's scream. Starting to panic, I turned slightly and looked at Remy. Remy stared at me intently and nodded, waiting for me to bite. His cool blue eyes bore into mine. They seemed to soothe me, to lessen my anxiety. Suddenly, I felt calmer. What had I been thinking about? I looked back at the boy, and my instincts took hold. My teeth slid easily into his flesh, slipping into his artery like an IV. He flinched, but didn't struggle. Warm blood flowed into my mouth, smoothly, easily, like water from a fountain. It tasted wonderful. My eyes rolled, and I swooned with the sense of it. It was so much warmer and sweeter than the blood from Remy's cellar. It was like the difference between a freshly opened bottle of wine and one that'd been sitting in the fridge for too long. My victim moaned pleasurably beneath my fangs, which was slightly disturbing. Was he actually enjoying this? Remy tapped my shoulder then, but I didn't want to let go. I felt lost in the feeding. Thankfully, Remy's hands gently pulled me away from the boy, and my fangs slid free of his flesh. The stock boy stared into space with a vacant smile etched on his lips. He looked like a happily sedated junkie. A tiny spot of blood marred his neck, and he was a little pale. But the 2 little puncture wounds left by my fangs were already healing, closing together as the enzymes in my saliva healed his cells. Remy had explained the process to me before, but seeing it firsthand was another thing altogether. "Thank you," Remy said to the boy. "I see the police station now. I will take her." "Any time," the boy sighed in a daze. Finally, he seemed to get control of his faculties and wandered back toward the loading dock. Remy pulled me away from the truck, and we hurried off, using our natural speed to flee the scene. Once behind a nearby building, we stopped. I looked back at the stock boy. He continued about his work like nothing was wrong, like we had never even been there. I looked up at Remy, reveling in my satisfaction from feeding. I felt excited, energetic, and so drawn to Remy I could hardly contain myself. My blood almost seemed to boil with longing. In an instant, I had Remy pinned against the wall of the building. My hands were on his shoulders and my body pressed against his. A shiver of longing trailed down my spine, and my hand instinctively wound up into his short dark hair. The silver in his eyes flared and his breath hitched. I tilted my face up, growing closer until I could feel his warm breath against my lips. My eyes closed, and I waited for the feeling of his mouth on mine. We stood there, neither one of us making the final move to close the distance between us. I opened my eyes and looked. I was stunned. Remy looked worried. "Is this really what you want?" he whispered into my lips, his voice quiet and hoarse with restraint. Everything in me screamed yes. I needed him. Then my mind seemed to snap back into place. Nothing had changed between us. I looked down at my hand. I had a death grip on the lapel of Remy's coat. What was I doing? I pulled back and looked up at him wildly. His intense blue-gray eyes glinted with silver in the low light of the parking lot. He wanted to kiss me. I could feel it, but he did not move closer. I'd come to care so much for him. He'd respected me, trusted me, shown me this world that I now felt strangely at home in. Did I really want our first real kiss to be a byproduct of bloodlust? I looked away then, feeling Remy's emotions pouring off of him. Feelings of lust, worry, and was that sorrow? I stepped out of his warm presence. He forced a smile then and took my hand. "You have taken a large step forward this evening. Let us call it a night." I nodded, still distracted by my intense feelings for him, just when I was suddenly struck by a feeling, one that sliced violently through my connection with him. It jolted me backwards, demanding to be heard, and I momentarily flashed back to the night I'd been shot. "Do you feel that?" I tried to rid myself of the sense, literally shaking my head to clear the strange cobwebs that infected my mind. But it lingered, clinging to my awareness. There was a presence. I turned and spotted a figure by the loading dock watching me. It was dark, like a black spot on the horizon. I bit my lip anxiously as I recalled the wave of tension I'd felt in the Viper Room. Yet it had a new sense to it, the strange pressure I felt in the presence of other supernaturals. "There!" I called out. "What is it?" he asked. There was a strange urgency in Remy's voice, like he'd already asked me that several times. Had I not heard him? "I don't know. I replied warily, and just like that, the figure disappeared, fading into the darkness. Remy stood in silent contemplation. It might have been a hunter. There should be no danger. You fed cleanly, Remy assured me. There is no reason to attack us. I nodded. He was probably right. But the figure had a strange, menacing, and yet familiar sense. Come, let us go, Remy said, guiding me away from the lot. Reluctantly, I nodded, still feeling haunted by the strange sighting.